Starting in 2026, Nebraska will make changes to its Medicaid program, enforcing work requirements for most members of that program. The new work requirements are the result of the One Big Beautiful Bill putting Nebraska ahead of the rest of the nation, which is federally mandated to start January 1st, 2027. The rule changes apply to able-bodied adults ages 19 to 64 in the Medicaid expansion population. These work requirements take effect in Nebraska on May 1st, 2026. Medicaid members must complete at least 80 hours of work requirement activities in one qualifying month, doing one of the following activities: working, attending school or an apprenticeship, taking part in a work program, or volunteering, or a combination of these activities to get to the 80-hour requirement as well. You can also meet the work requirements if you're working and earn at least $580 in a month. That's the equivalent of 80 hours at the current federal minimum wage. KTIV's Taylor Decker joins me in studio tonight to break down the steps on the Medicaid changes and what you need to do if you're impacted. Taylor?
Yes, Matt, let's take a look here at the numbers. As of September 2025, about 297,000 Nebraskans were enrolled in Medicaid. During the announcement, Governor Jim Pillen said an estimated 30,000 Nebraskans could be impacted by this policy change. On the Department of Health and Human Services website, Nebraska Medicaid says it'll try to use information it already has available to see if someone has completed the work requirements or qualify for an exemption. And if they need more information, the DHHS staff will contact you with an information request. DHHS may request copies of pay stubs, school transcripts, or information about volunteer or work program hours. Responses back from the department can be in person, online, by phone, or through the mail. The Medicaid member must respond within 30 days or you may lose your Medicaid coverage. If you don't get a request from the department, they say they don't need information from you at that time. So I'll continue to follow any more changes and clarifications put out by the department. Matt?
Taylor Deckard in the studio tonight. Taylor, thank you. Now, here are some of the people that are exempt from the new rules. Some of the exemptions include people under age 26 who aged out of foster care, parents, caretakers, or guardians of kids up to age 13, or of an individual with disabilities, people compliant with work requirements under the SNAP or Temporary Assistance for Needy Families programs, and women who are pregnant or up to 12 months after the end of their pregnancy. For more on the exemptions and other state resources, just check out the story right now at KTIV.com. Now, if you don't complete the work requirements or don't qualify for an exemption, DHHS says you will lose your Medicaid coverage and you'll need to reapply for Medicaid. The state is also offering resources for people that are seeking a job by the starting date in May.